In the alternate universe featured in the Fox science fiction series Fringe, Secretary of Defense Walter Bishop's office features a large map of the United States. This map, upon closer examination, sports several differences with the geography of our United States. In the last episode, I asked Mike Stevenson and Andrew Potts about the historical significance of the borders featured on this map. Today, we continue to explore these alternate borders, starting with Nevada. On the map, the state of Nevada is labeled as Independent Nevada. It is never made clear whether the area is truly an independent sovereign nation, or if the difference only exists in the name.
Of course, California calls itself the California Republic, and some people also put New California Republic. So maybe it has to do with something like that. Maybe they broke off from originally and they just reformed and joined back in as a reformed government maybe, and just call themselves the Independent Nevada.
Having been there, they're very independent minded as it is, considering there are things legal in Nevada that are certainly not legal anywhere else. So, I mean, with legalized prostitution in some places and gambling in Las Vegas, I mean, it's independent in spirit, if not in fact, I think.
One of the most puzzling oddities on the map is the missing chunk of California, with the coastline being pushed farther east. Some online commenters have suggested that the missing half could be part of another nation, although this is unlikely due to the irregular border. Others have posited that the area suffered a megathrust earthquake that sent the western portions into the ocean, as in the movie San Andreas.
I guess that seems like what could be like an earthquake or something caused maybe a tsunami or the water to flood in, or else the land collapsed, probably.
Although many scientists are quick to point out that this is geologically impossible. So what gives?
Well, one thing I think, if you bring the coastline in several hundred miles to the east, you're probably also going to economically develop places like Nevada, because you're a little bit closer to the coast, and trade probably would have developed, international trade would have probably developed in Utah, Nevada, places like that a lot faster than would have otherwise been, because it took decades, really, for those regions to develop economically, and I think it would have probably happened faster.
The only theory that holds any water is that, like many of the other fringe events on the other side, the breakdown of the laws of physics might have resulted in some sort of vortex, causing a cataclysmic shift in the tectonics of the region. Some point to the presence of San Francisco Bay in Southern California as evidence that the area developed like that over time, but it begs the question as to why the map's creators would bother to draw it like that in the first place. The fact that Hollywood still exists in this timeline suggests that the area may have shared geological similarities to our version of California up to the point that Peter was kidnapped, resulting in a humongous fringe event that led to the western region being swallowed by the ocean. Who knows? Moving farther southeast, another inconspicuous difference on the map is that Louisiana is labeled as Louisiana Territory, suggesting that it might not have become a state. Historically, there was debate as to whether Louisiana should be admitted to the Union due to its demographic makeup.
I guess that would have to do with what the situation with Puerto Rico is like. They remain independent. A lot of their senators, they decide they don't want to join the U.S. Probably have to deal with tax reasons. And that may be the same case for Louisiana.
I think some people who have spent some time in Louisiana would still maybe wonder if it's a state because its culture is so diverse and so different from so much of the rest of the United States. Again, for geopolitical reasons, I could see the United States taking it if it was not a friendly entity, because the same reason why it was important to control the port of New Orleans anyway, either by treaty or eventually by force. Farming in the western states along the Mississippi River would have almost been impossible without a way to get their crop to market down the Mississippi River. So Jefferson was willing to buy it from the French. I think over time we would have been willing to take it from the French. And after all, since it's the French, it would have been easy.
Moving farther east, we see that the states of North Carolina and South Carolina are combined into one state, Carolina. Seeing as the division between North and South in our timeline has had much historical significance, especially prior to the Civil War, this is an especially important geographical difference that could have vast implications on the timeline.
Cash crop development in South Carolina definitely led it along a different path than what North Carolina did. I mean, not to say that there was no cash crop development, but cash crop development in the South, first rice and indigo and then later cotton, pushed South Carolina more towards an antebellum Southern mentality, whereas North Carolina, while they still had slaves, were never as staunchly pro-slavery as South Carolina became, where the majority of the population of South Carolina in the colonial period were actually African American all the way up through the Civil War years. And if I'm not mistaken, probably still is today.
I just think that it just has to deal with that they never separated in the first place.
If you don't play slavery and cash crop development into the equation, I think South and North Carolina could have recombined very easily.
The final difference on the map is that West Virginia and Virginia are still one entity, which is called the District of Virginia, meaning it might also not be a state. I originally made the mistake of assuming that the District of Virginia would replace the District of Columbia since they're right next to each other, but I noticed that on the map, the District of Columbia is still there, although it's just not labeled.
West Virginia secession, essentially from Virginia, during the lead up to the Civil War, if that had been denied by the federal government, or if the federal government had applied the usual ways of becoming a state, West Virginia would have still been part of Virginia. It would have never, the separate counties would have never seceded in the first place. So I think that would have had to have happened first, because under no other scenario can I see Virginia giving up West Virginia unless they were forced to do it for some reason.
I think that would probably mean that what we consider, what our capital would be, Washington, D.C., of course, is the District of Columbia. I think that Virginia was formed into a type of a government/military district. I would assume that they would have a lot of military things headquartered there near the capital, and that pretty much is the only thing that would make me think that that's why.
The population obviously would have grown immensely from what it originally was, and then you see what Washington, D.C. has grown into. I think that the district would have had to have been allowed electoral votes, popular votes, and presidential a vote in presidential elections much sooner than it actually happened. It would have been hard to not address the will of the people that would have lived in that region. And it took for a very long time before D.C. had these rights. So I think that would have been the biggest difference.